I'm sorry? You
How many
talking to me?
people on here? Is there a way to tell how
No,
many?
he was asking what it was cost.
Oh.
Soon.
Okay, so we got couple things that we wanna look at, still from the list. Chief, are you on? Is he muted? Chief, you there?
I'm here, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now. Okay, in the discussion that we had earlier, part of the team had gone through some of the cuts that they were proposing to get to where we need to get to bring the increase of spending back down to more of a level close to inflation. And so they went through all the departments and identified where some cuts could be made to get to $2 million in cuts. So for the police department, they had looked at 255,000. 255. And they said that would equate to half an FTE of a dispatcher, 3 sworn officers, and maybe some of the uniform budget. So I had asked all the department heads that are here to talk to their areas about what that would cause, or what the impact would be to your department if you needed to do that. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to do the same. In their discussion, they also said if they did that, they would put back in the budget the 100,000 that was cut for overtime to make up for, they know if some of these were cut, there would be more overtime.
Right, yeah, I would just like to start off by saying, if the town does go in this direction, I mean, there's gotta be some tough decisions made on what the priorities are of local government. And I think when you look at anywhere, the priorities are public safety, infrastructure, and schools. And whether that's police, fire, public works, schools, that's gotta be the priority. You can't take a broad brush and just, decimate each department the same way. Because I'm just saying the ramifications of cuts like that, laying off people that we just spent 2 years training and $100,000 each train, and be the only police department in the state of Connecticut laying somebody off. It's gonna have repercussions for many years. And putting back the $100,000, you're gonna be spending more money on overtime than what you're saving, because we are such a bare bones budget to begin with, the department, that the minimum manning of the ship would cause that overtime budget to skyrocket. So I think you gotta look at what the ramifications of that are and where the priorities are. So, I would say that number would really cause havoc within the department. So not short term, but for long term.
Does anybody have,
All that?
go ahead, I'm sorry, what?
Were you able to hear all that?
Yep, we heard it all. Yes, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the chief on that? Yep.
Chief, this is Con.
Yeah.
With regard to the minimum shift requirement, which is a contractual obligation, isn't
No,
it?
it's not.
You there?
Yeah, it's, again, contractual requirement and having enough people for the safety of the officers and our police, we have to have a minimum number on it.
So,
I always say, I'm not stop and shop, I can't shut down an aisle, or put somebody in jeopardy like that.
so if 3 individuals were laid off, would you then be unable to meet the minimum shift requirement I'm assuming you have 3 shifts in a day?
Yeah, it would impact, it would require overtime, it would require ordering in people, mandatory courses, overtime, and for somebody. So it has all those ramifications. And the bigger thing we have is, the time it takes to hire, train, equip officers. We have 3 relatively new officers. Over the last year and a half, we spent right over $300,000 to train, get them through, the academy, equipment training, and any type of layoffs like that, it would be scooped up by other departments of heartbeat, and we would be left ordering in officers and paying exorbitant amount of overtime to fill the minimum requirements. That's the reality of it. I mean, it's kind of an ugly reality.
Anything else, Con?
No, that's good, thank you.
So I had a question, Chief, this is Sean. Would you be able to just speak to, what impacts public safety wise this would have on residents itself? Not just like the financial end of it, but like how this could impact public safety with a broad conversation?
Well, it's gonna have an impact when you have officers being, ordered in, and at minimum, you don't have enough people on the shifts, you're gonna have people overworking, retired. You'll be cutting another dispatcher, so you're gonna have less coverage of your 911 calls, any emergencies, things of that nature. So it definitely has a ripple effect throughout the entire, safety of the town and for the safety of the officers on the road. That's a huge concern for me.
Thank you, Chief.
Anybody else? No? All right, thanks, Chief.
Okay, and I just would like to say too, if there is a dollar amount again that would be put back to the police commission's side of that money comes from.
Okay.
Because quite frankly, the members of the board of finance don't have the knowledge of the day-to-day operations, or at least come into the PD and discuss those, or just blanket comments are made or laying off certain positions without knowing the implications.
Are you guys okay with that? If we say that's the dollar amount, then we would go back to them to see where it would come from?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Chief, for that.
All right, thank you.
Again, just to clarify, I was pressed, right? When it was
I asked
No,
you.
no, I wasn't, it was, well, I was asked.
Yeah.
I was pressed to say, well, how do you get there?
Right.
So,
In your thought pattern, right, that's what you were saying. Because we kind of did that when we looked at ours. I think that just leaves one. All right, so we're gonna have Sean Parkhurst and Amber Mortensen Hurdle talking about Board of Ed.
Amber is empowered to talk first, so we're gonna turn the mic to her, and then I will take it from there.
Okay.
So, yeah, hear me? So, Sean and I had discussed what.
Get good and close to it.
Because when you
I feel
turn
like
your
I'm missing it.
yeah, but then you turn your head,
You
Amber.
gotta be close and you can't turn.
Okay. Sorry. Give it a comedic performance here. We went through the additional cuts that we have already looked at. On top of that, we're looking at, right now we're at 9 teachers. We're looking at between 15 to 18 teachers. Athletics, JV sports, we could look at middle school sports. Student programming, extracurriculars, that includes like the musical. I think the pool closure would probably be pretty certain under this. Interventionists and the paraeducators, which would put a real damper on all the IEPs and the 504s. Class sizes would increase. We may have to look at an SRO at one of the schools. Custodial staff, if we don't have enough, it would require maybe closures of school on snow days if we can't plow. Maybe loss of AP classes, electives. I think it would be, just like everyone else, we're trying really hard to move the numbers around. I think this would be hugely drastic to the school system and all the kids. And I think one thing that we have to remember is we want people to move here. We want people to come to a town where they feel safe, where their kids can get educated, you know, where they're happy. I grew up here. My parents grew up here. My grandmother grew up here, I'm one of those. And you know, I raised my children here because this is the town that I love. And I don't know how we get to a point where everybody is happy, but I mean, this isn't it. But I understand Mike, and he's trying. Because there are no solutions, but this would decimate the schools, that amount.
So just a couple other things I wanna add. Because one of the things Patty asked was, what other potential increase in costs might we encounter? So as we take away programs, as we take away electives, as we take away many of the things that draw many of our disengaged or even engaged students to school, when school becomes just come to class and go home, families do have, by right of school choice, to choose other programs in other schools outside of Windsor Locks. So as our families make that choice, that's an expense if they're a Windsor Locks resident that we have to pay. We have to pay for them to choose another school outside of our district. So that's a potential cost. Even though we might be cutting programs, they can choose to go elsewhere, and that's a cost to the school system. So to Patty's question, what might be additional costs that we might incur? That might be an additional cost. So we can't limit that. The other thing that, and again, I just want to say this because I know on the Board of Ed side, we've been mentioned at times of these being scare tactics. I don't think these are scare tactics. The things that Amber talked about before are items that the Board of Ed already voted on to get to the $800 plus the $600,000 cut. Those are real items. So when she talks about we've already had a cut of 9 teachers to get to the amount that we already are at, those have already been approved. So when she talks about how would we get to this next round of cuts, those are all things that we would have to work through, as I talked about. It's a Board of Education and a leadership team recommendation. So these are all things that would be the next layer. It ultimately would be student programs and staff, because there is no other place, as people have talked already, to go other than that. When Devin talked about the lack of ability to plow, the lack of ability to delay when there's a storm, I know Amber talked about that, but if we have to lay off or eliminate custodial staff, that might mean if the public works is not plowing, we also take care of our own area with our custodial staff. We might have a closure of schools for more days than normal. Reader block, which is one of our, I would say one of our key areas at the high school. It's really kind of our, kind of a star piece that we have in terms of our high school, where we provide emotional support, we provide academic support for our students. That's an area that could be gone. And I know some people have mixed thoughts about that, but if that's gone, that is a key support for both struggling students, but also students that need that extra push. That's where we do some AP tutoring as well. That could be gone. So these are all things that I just want to make sure the community, more than just the Board of Finance, because obviously I know you have a tough job in front of you to get a budget across the finish line, but I think the community at large needs to know, much like all the other town boards and commissions that have already talked, this would decimate the school district. And I know the chief talked about this, but you know, I'm going to be biased and tell you that the school should be the heartbeat of the community. This will take away the heartbeat of your community.
Does anybody have questions for Sean and Amber?
If I could make a comment, first of all, both of you very well said. You know, it's not easy for me to sit up here and talk about all, not just the Board of Education, but all the positions. It's not. I certainly didn't have this attitude after the first vote, or before the first vote. It's not easy. I just want to throw out 2 quick comments, and they don't relate to fiscal year 27, but just down the road, please just keep it in mind. First of all, I want to pair what my colleague Sean has said in previous meetings. Okay, in the fiscal year 27 budget, there's over $2 million of one-time non-recurring revenue that's being used to lower the taxes. I know that's not specifically a Board of Education comment, but certainly all the revenue, it just gets all lumped together, right? And it services both the Board of Ed and the town side. So please, as you go through your, let's say fiscal year 28 planning, and you're looking at a minimum, your contractualized fixed costs related, I guess primarily to unionized workforce and the related medical benefits, just keep that in mind, that when we start fiscal year 28, you know, we're gonna drop 2 million of revenues, and I mean, certainly a piece of that's gotta relate to the Board of Education. Number two, I know neither one of you are here, but probably 10 plus years ago, I mean, I was laughed at here in public when I said, look, something transformational has to happen. I know it's not gonna happen in fiscal year 27, but I truly hope that behind the scenes, the Board of Education and the leadership team is working on something transformational. I don't know what it is, much like what the Chief of Police said, and I agree with the Chief of Police. The Board of Finance, starting with myself, we clearly don't understand the day-to-day operations of a police force or even an educational system. But something has to give. It's not gonna give in fiscal year 27, but at some point, please, there's gotta be transformational stuff going on.
So I just wanna make one comment on your last comment. We took an entire year of 25-26 to develop a 5-year strategic plan that was just adopted by the Board of Education. There are 3 buckets in that plan. One of them, and I think this might be what you're alluding to a little bit, so I'm just gonna say
Okay,
it.
yeah.
One of those buckets is facilities and operations
Yeah.
that could be an area of transformation. I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough, so thank you.
Because I think we're talking the same.
I won't be here in 5 years,
You might be.
but that's okay. I won't be here, but that's okay, so, great. I'm glad there's at least something that's been started. Makes me feel just a little bit better tonight. Not great, but just a little bit, so thank you both.
I guess after hearing all of this, the only question that I have is certainly the goal is to pass the budget. I guess the question that is important to ask whether or not we want to pass the budget or the budget within which the town can operate and function. I think that should be the driver, in my opinion.
All right, I think we've gone through all the departments. Now, Con, you wanted to go through each item and do you need convincing to support these, or do you wanna just discuss a little more each one of the items?
No, I think some that I could support. And bearing in mind too, that this is, last year and this year were extraordinary years because of this phase. And on the one hand, Winslow Locks is fortunate that the value of our homes continued to rise and kept pace with the state, which is on the plus side. On the negative side, that means that the businesses in the town whose property does not rise as rapidly as the home values is getting a tax break. They're getting a terrific tax break, and they're getting it at the expense of all of the homeowners whose homes are more valuable and the costs have gone up. So hopefully after the phase is completed, there is opportunity to do some rebuilding. But as the people have pointed out, when you lose well-trained employees, you don't want to have to lose and then rebuild a police department, for example. Or, you get rid of prime teachers, and then you've got to hire rookies in the future, and you're rebuilding your education system. That's not good. But I do think there's some areas where we can cut. I'll run through my list.
Before you start,
Yeah.
could you possibly pull up the spreadsheet that has all the different boards of educations on it?
So we don't have this spreadsheet because we're not updating it until the budget is final. We can certainly pull the most recent one, but it wouldn't be with,
If any cuts we've made, as we know, I'm pretty sure.
yeah.
Okay. Would that be helpful to people to look at these as we go through it?
Yeah, I think just to see what, I know it's not gonna show the cut, but just to see what the numbers are.
That's all. And Tom, while they're doing that, some of the, when you were asking for percentages of increases too, just remember, last year, in certain areas, we had the TIF money that we used to put in salaries.
Right.
So some of the increases look higher percentage-wise than they will if we're going from what it was to the
On the
non-TIF.
individual cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the bottom line.
The bottom line still have the total of what we took from salary. Okay, so which one do you wanna look at first, Ken?
Well, I'll do them in the order that Mike rolled them out to us.
Okay,
I don't wanna do 255,000 on the police force, I think that's just too much. Much too much. And I'll tell you, about a year ago at Christmas, I was knocking on a door in the house, of a house here in Windsor Locks to get a hold of somebody and couldn't get in. And I knew the person had to be there because it had snowed lightly and there were no prints around the house and the person had animals and dogs in the house and I knew they had to be let out. And I was about to call the police when suddenly they drove up the driveway and they'd been called by the person's cousin and told that she was concerned. And I was there as the police got into the house, worked at it, found the individual with a broken hip on the stairway, and had been there for maybe 24 hours. And they dealt with this in the most professional fashion. And it happened so quickly, the ambulance showed up, everything clicked. In about 20 minutes, the person was on the way down to the hospital. And that's a standard that Windsor Locks deserves. And I don't want to put anything like that in peril, even though we're having a very difficult time. So I would say that I wouldn't want to see the police department cut any further than another 50,000. I could accept that. It would strain the chief, I know, and it would strain the department. But as Mike has pointed out, this is a tough time. So I would recommend a 50,000 on that. Public Works.
do we wanna
Yeah.
see the feelings
Yeah,
of
you-
each one as we go along?
Sure.
What's your
What
feeling?
about the 100, keep the 100 off?
The 100 overtime that we were gonna give
Give
back?
that back.
No,
Definitely not.
yeah.
So don't give that back and only cut 50,000.
And would we say that, that 100 has to, like, still, would it still come from overtime, or would we say, hey, here's 150, you have to figure out where it comes from, but the 100 wouldn't come from overtime? Cause that was part of that original.
I think again, letting the chief make the decision.
Okay, so we would just say, just the additional 50 years.
So because we have to vote on each one of these individually, if any changes that we make, I just wanna, as we go along, what would that do to your vote on?
It's, similar to 2 weeks ago, I will support the cut, there's no pushback, I'll support it. If 50 is the highest we can go, I'm good with the cut.
So I guess what I would ask then is there a certain level that we would have to get to where you could actually support the budget?
Yeah, but yes, but I'd like to just go through and see everything.
Okay.
If we're way off of the number, then, there's
Okay.
always a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of compromise, but let's just go through. But 50K, I'll support it.
And just remember, this is one person.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
right, and everybody,
Right.
these are my suggestions,
Yeah.
like did his. And I thank Mike because I'm reacting and acting off of work that he's done. With regard to Public Works, you hate to see a maintainer or a trained person laid off, and then maybe a couple of years later have to be rehired, or a rookie gets rehired. And we've been through that. We've seen the town lose people to take a good job in another town, and then eventually the town has to fill the job at a higher wage than the one who left was getting in the first place. So it can be penny wise and pound foolish. But with regard to public works, again, it's, the recommendation amounted to about $138,000, is that correct?
Yep.
I'd be willing to accept the cut to public works if we could go to cut that right in half to $70,000. The assessor, with regard, you want to vote on that?
No, because
No, you-
we gotta find out what the whole package is gonna do to them. And, there's gonna be, as we said, some that we're not gonna get on easy.
So, I just had a question on that.
Yep.
So that's 17,000 on top of what was, Neil was proposed before, was that 70,000?
That's new, isn't it? Because
Yeah, it's new.
So it would be 55,000 plus the 70,000 overall?
The original 55 we cut from the first to the second. Was it 55, Devin?
No, the assessor.
The first, when we cut from the first to the second. Not from what you asked to the first, from the first to the second.
It was 50,000.
50,000. Thanks.
So that'd be a total of 120, this would be, yeah.
And more if you look at what they originally asked for.
Right. With regard to the assessor, now, the assessor is the office that generates the money for this town. Mike, with regard to the 40,000 on the assessor, would you tell me again your rationale on that?
Well, let's set the actual number aside, but the rationale on the position is that it hasn't been filled for many months, you know, I don't wanna say coming up on a year, but maybe it has been that long at this point, since we're in June. So the money's there, it's in the budget, but there's not a person doing the work. So, again, when you're talking about budgetary cuts, it's a little bit easier to remove money from a sort of a vacant position, especially one this long, you know. A little bit easier.
But remember, not putting aside the money. She doesn't have 40,000 left in that line. There's probably only about 14 to 20,000, just a rough guess.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the 14 to 25.
All right, I'd leave it alone. The HR department, have we filled that, or is that currently empty?
Currently empty. Being done by the labor attorney
Right.
and Yana's, some of Yana's stuff. And John's.
John, me, Tammy, in my department. And again, I have an indication from my staff member that it will not continue going forward. And quite frankly, it's not the setup that we can continue going forward. And I cannot continue this role moving forward as well.
Using the attorneys, John said $300 an hour.
Correct.
Have attorney fees come anywhere close to adding up to the salary of this individual?
I don't have the latest bill, but we probably in the last 2 weeks spent more than 20 hours in the attorney's fees.
It'll be 6,000.
That's the minimum, but we didn't get the bill yet. Probably get it soon, or I can reach out and get the specific update.
What was the saving on eliminating the HR department?
115,000, he estimated.
I think, I wouldn't give up that. Attorney's fees could easily add up to 30 or 40% of that.
Yes, an attorney essentially cannot fulfill the duties on site from the perspective, like, we had open enrollment, right? So Tammy and I did open enrollment. Labor attorney cannot come here and do the open enrollment. Someone physically need to do it here in-house. It needs to be a person who does that. When there is an onboarding, someone need to be here to provide people with paperwork, put them in the system and all of that. Right now, the payroll person put people in the system. She also pays those people, so it kind of creates the audit issue, because technically that should be done by two different people. So we can be marked for the auditors for doing this, because technically it should be a separation there. Here, we'll handle it here. Not to mention, we don't have, John and I are discovering that there were certain violations in terms of background checks, certain trainings that were not performed that potentially could lead to greater liability. There is an OSHA reporting that's not being done at the moment, so essentially OSHA was here and we still didn't hear back in terms of what their findings are. So there's certainly things on which we're not in compliance with, because we don't have an HR person who will continue to be not in compliance. In terms of like hiring and firing, someone need to handle this, and it's time consuming. We don't have anyone who's engaged in an employee relationship. Right now I have, 2 FMLAs. Again, someone need to look at that paperwork, making sure that it's requested, we have everything that needs to be filed correctly. It's not something that labor attorney will simply take on and say, okay, I'll manage it all, even if you're willing to pay $300 an hour.
And what could we put in, this was, saves 40,000, what could we, Michael, what could we save by eliminating the HR department?
Well, when we eliminated it a year or so ago,
So you're advocating that we eliminate it?
well, it was already eliminated. It was
Right.
eliminated
But we
over a
put-
year ago.
And we put some dollars in this year to bring it back.
Bring it back.
Yeah, what was that?
115,000.
115.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna suggest that we cut that in half, because we've gotta pay the attorney. We know that there are going to be HR issues, we know there are going to be labor issues. We can't ignore it entirely. And perhaps next year would be the year when we can put in a full-time assessor and build that department. But I'm gonna recommend that we cut that in half. $55,000. For that department.
That's the reduction?
No, that would be, I'm trying to cut it in half roughly.
Okay.
So 55 is what you would suggest leaving in there?
Yeah, I suggest leaving it.
So I
Is
guess,
that 55 for who?
Well, it'd probably be used for attorney's fees.
so my question is, HR work is not in my current job description. I want to be very transparent that I'm not willing to continue going into the next fiscal year, just keep doing this for free, as well as the union person in my department. So the real operational question, because Patty also wants to know what will be the other costs associated with this. So it will be other costs, but I guess the question is, who will take on here inside of the house those duties? It will not be me, I'm not willing to do it for free. And the person in my department indicated that as much as we've been helpful, it cannot continue forever just because we need to cut the budget. So, starting July 1st, who will take care of this operationally? Because
Yana, what are the sort of HR issues that you're being forced to deal with? What are they?
For example, last week we had open enrollment, essentially spend the day on open enrollment. for the insurance, because every business once a year has open enrollment, so technically people who are not in the medical plans, they can choose to do an insurance now. It's once a year, so you need to have it under control. Yes, yes, so someone need to do that. I mean, like what we heard from, issues and Parks and Recs, that we've been managing together with, Parks and Recs director.
Maybe.
I will recommend to Amy ACT for Amy director